Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Fallout Season 1, Episode 6. A lot of really interesting stuff, a lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I'm going to break it down time frame-wise, where we're going to start off with the past, where we get to spend more time with Cooper and Barb. We are seeing Coop be the spokesperson for Vault-Tec, continuously doing these ads for them. So it wasn't just like the photo he did and kind of essentially becoming like the symbol for like their mascot, that is for the blonde haired dude for Vault-Tec, but also he does other ads for him where, hey, he goes and is at Vault 4 and kind of doing a commercial showcasing it, which obviously comes up present day in the storyline. But yeah, he also meets, what was Home Dude's name? He kept calling him something else. He kept calling him Buck, but his name is Bud. And that whole conversation about like, oh yeah, like we also hear about like the armors that the Brotherhood uses, where it's like, oh, those armors were used by soldiers in the army, which I guess that kind of showcases like the Brotherhood being like the cultish, maybe. I mean, I say cult, but it's really, I guess, like militia, I guess. Like, do they have the armors because they were soldiers before? Did they find the armors after all these years, or did they just like find the blueprints to make the armor? I'm curious, like, were those armors already intact? To be fair, it's like they were using like the 45 series. The one they're up to now is like the 60, so I don't know. Tangents and all that aside, I mean, it's all relevant, so it's not that much of a tangent, but obviously, this also solidifies what I was wondering before. I was unclear. I was like, does Barb work for Vault-Tec? Like, she was able to kind of get this pulled off. And it's like, yes, she does. They're going to have a party at Coop's house, and it's going to be basically Vault-Tec people coming over. Because they had this whole lengthy conversation about, what was it that Buck said, or rather Bud said? He was like, basically, there's one thing that you need to basically win a fight or whatever. He was like, it's not this, it's not that, it's time. Time is basically the ultimate weapon in a fight. And he also says that basically everything comes down to one word, management, which is ironic considering, well, we saw how management played out in Vault 32. So it's like, yeah, that's not the kind of key thing that you thought it was. I mean, maybe at one point in time until crap hits the fan, and then you become like aware of like what's really going on, which seems like the people in Vault 32 were aware of what was really going on. We're still on the outside trying to figure it all out. But either way, Cooper was talking to Barb at one point in time, and he was talking about his dreams of what he wanted for their lives. It's like, right, we could just get away from the city, and it's a little too much. And it's like, we could just live on a farm and kind of retire type of situation. But Barb is diving deeper and deeper into the Vault-Tec, to the like little thing, the devices they have on their wrist. I don't know if those are the Pit Boys. Like, once again, I know nothing. Like, they've never directly been like, oh, this is the Pit Boy, but I'm assuming it is. The only time they really referenced, I think that's the first time they've ever used the term Pit Boy, was when they were referring to how did the Raiders get inside. It's like, oh, they had Rose's Pit Boy. It's like, I would assume it's the thing on her wrist. I think it's the little gadget thing. I don't think they've ever expressly been like, yeah, that's what this is. So that's been my understanding, but once again, I'm not the Fallout dude. It could probably be super obvious, but I feel stupid for not recognizing it, but yada yada, so on and so forth. So she's going to be wearing one now because a lot of Vault-Tec employees kind of have to start wearing one now. And so Cooper has this reluctancy about this because he doesn't feel good about it, because him and his acting buddy Sebastian, who is the voice of Snip Snip, like basically he sold his voice rights to this company and now they've used it for the robots. He's like, oh, do you know how much I paid to give away my voice? And Cooper was like, 10 million. The way he was hesitating, I was like, oh, I thought he was doing that because Cooper nailed the number exactly. But he's like, no, I got like paid 186 and I got a robot. I got a free model. That was my payment. But they had this interesting conversation about how like other actors kind of stay away from like Coop. Like he lost out on a job because other actors don't want to work with him because he's seen as kind of a sellout, because you're part of, like, you're being the poster child for a company that's talking about basically the end of the world. The optics there is just kind of like, yeah, you're kind of the poster child for the end of the world, so I can see that. But they're like, oh, we're going against you on principle, because I guess it's like you're selling out because it's because you're working with like $1 trillion company, so it makes you, it's like, oh, you're no longer an artist, you're a sellout, you're making money because you're doing these ads. We're actors. I don't know, like, but even like Sebastian was like, yeah, that lady that was talking about standing on principle, she was full of BS because she did a whole bunch of ads too. But Sebastian was coming at it from the perspective of basically we're actors and stuff like that. But that's going to be a thing of the past. Like nerds, like who show up wearing like pocket protectors, like at a party or whatever, are going to be the future. They're going to be the ones running things, and basically, product is going to be the future. And he's like, you and me, Cooper, we're products or brands, stuff like that, which I thought was kind of interesting, which I'm sure is kind of a little reflective of our world where it's just like, right, like being a brand, being a product, like we are all products in our own way, whether we make ourselves one or whether the world has kind of made us one. Coop wasn't happy about this whole circumstance and situation because it's not really his world. He's just like, man, I just want to do the movies. That's what I am. I'm an actor. I'm trying to keep it simple. The fact is, kind of getting dragged into this world he wants, especially because he doesn't like these people. It's just because for him, it's like, these are essentially they're pencil pushers. They're numbers people, and that's all they care about. Where it's like, once again, it's like, I went to war, I fought for the freedom. He even told like Bud or Buck, whatever his name is, I think it's Bud, was like, yo, oh, there were flaws in that armor. He was like, dude, like because of that armor, those flaws in that armor, a lot of my people I went to war with died because of that. But he was like, yeah, but that was then. I'm more about like PR and yada 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 yada. He's like, I moved away from like the more technical side of things, and it's all about PR. It's just, so it's like, okay, the guy's just kind of talking out of his ass, and it's just like, right, this company is just filled with people like that, which Cooper doesn't like. Then he meets up with one of his other acting buddies, Charles, who is talking about kind of essentially that Vault Tech is the devil. And it's like, oh, you're saying Barb? It's like, no, I'm not saying that. Barb is good, but he's like, right, this is essentially, he's like looking at Vault Tech as a cult. What was the term he had used? I forgot what it was. But essentially, he's basically saying it's in Vault Tech's best interest for there to be a war. They are selling these vaults and everything, but it's like none of that means anything if you don't really use them. It's like, right, you can't. But if you can, you had that fear in people's eyes, like, oh, the world could end, and be prepared for it, you need a vault. So that for him, it's like, why don't you? What makes you think like, right, those who are in control will basically dictate things. He was making a reference to like, oh yeah, like these cattle ranchers who became the ones in the majority of power. And it's like, well, what did the sheriffs and stuff like that do? Like when the cattle, what happened when the cattle ranchers and stuff like that gained the most power? It's like the city got burnt, the town or city got burnt to the ground. So he's kind of saying like, right, Vault Tech, it's in their best interest to basically let this world go to nuclear war because it benefits their bottom line, because that's all they care about. They care about money. It's not about safety. Sure, safety's just the product that they're selling to make money. So that's the perspective he's coming from, which you see validity in that. And he's trying to get Cooper, he's like, I'm trying to open your eyes, but also in turn we could open up Barb's eyes to like the group that she's working with. They're not the good people. They're trying to sell like people on this dream when in actuality they're trying to sell fear and make money. But it's like, well, that seems like it's all a moot point now, when it's all like, right, you said potentially if they are the ones who kind of push the needle to set everything in motion, considering like, hey, they're $1 trillion company, they can like make shit like shift and change the world if they need to fit where they need it to be, type of situation. So I mean, does it benefit them in the apocalyptic world that is Fallout now, present day? Probably not. I'd assume not. But it could also, greed could always lead to a thing of, you think the range of how things are going to go. It's like, right, we knew things would be bad, but we thought for the most part everything would be okay and manageable enough until we found out, oh shit, it's not. To be fair, we don't know where Vault Tech stands in the current world. We know it exists through the vaults, but how much of that through line is still there? Like, I mean, you'd assume with the overseers and management that it's still there. Like a lot of the principal aspects have probably been passed down from generation to generation of what we need to do to build things from the ground up. And I don't know if it's going to be like supposed to be Vault Tech is going to be the one that brings the world back, kind of solidifying that name of, we're the ones who made the vaults back in the day, but here we are basically restarting the world, restarting society, or at least that's the spin that the vaults have kind of been believing in. What was interesting too was like staying on that vault tech side of things when Barb was talking to Cooper, because Coop's like, right, we don't have to worry about you working in vault tech. Like, we have enough money, we could just buy our way into a vault. But she's like, a good one. And he was like, wait, what do you mean by that? And she immediately changed subject because it's like, right, there are some vaults that are god awful. Because I think I do know that that's a video game thing where some of the vaults did break down and like they're not. Like, there aren't societies living there. They're just, like, they're shit because they fell apart during the fallout. That's my understanding. I feel like I had that vague knowledge of, like, not all the vaults worked out. Because it's like, yeah, there were shitty vaults that were just kind of like, it was fine. But then there's other really, really good ones, which is what Barb is trying to get her family into one. Which leads to this discussion her and Cooper have later on, where she's like, yeah, we can't, oh, sad that, our daughter's so attached to that doll because if we have to go into those vaults, like, you can't take the dolls. So Cooper pushes back and like, well, why not? Who made up that rule? It wasn't a thing initially, but like, who is it that gets to dictate that stuff? The fact of the matter is, do we have to wear the blue jumpsuits? What if I want to wear a green one? It's like, for her, it's like, why are you getting so caught up in this semantics and stuff like that? It's kind of idiotic. It's like, is that really important in the grand scheme of things when we're dealing with nuclear warfare? But for him, it's like, no, I'm using examples of a larger thing of, I went to war to fight for our freedoms, and for me to have to basically go into these bunkers and be under someone else dictating those rules, like, that's another thing entirely. But it sets Barb off, understandably so, because for her, it's like, I lived every day panicked about whether or not you were going to come back home. I was here raising our daughter, scared to death that you might not come back. So yes, you might not have to agree with everything. You might not like how everything goes, but I'm going to do what it takes to put us, our family, the people we care about, into the best position to survive. Because this isn't just about us. This is about our daughter, ensuring what's best for her. So, and even Coop apologizes, like, he knows that his wife is just doing the right thing. But it's like, right, you get swept up in everything. But even you can recognize, like, the fact is, that's some BS where you're like, yo, I have to do everything. I have to work so hard to make sure we're in good vaults, because some vaults aren't that great. Like, that's fuck. And you're selling the notion of some of these vaults being like, oh, they're all going to be fine. You know, oh, you keep the rads away, radiation, and you keep the reds away, communists. But it's like, come on, like, the fact is, that's some hot shit right there. As in, like, not hot shit in a cool way. Like, I meant hot shit in kind of a bullshit way. I don't know why I didn't just say bullshit. Just hot shit came out of my mouth first. I'm like, no. Either way, I'm spending too much time explaining that, but it's like, it's some bullshit where it's like, not all the vaults are good. And it's like, and you already know that, because I'm sure they're cutting costs. Like, it'll be cheaper to kind of put out these BS ones, but then, like, the really important people will find their way to the really, really good vaults. So we'll kind of leave it at that. So, which Cooper after that does show up to, like, you know, the meeting with kind of like the resistance of sort. But then, like, there's stuff present day that made you go like, wait, especially when Cooper present day was like, oh, that's not the woman I remember, when he saw Moldaver's photo. And you're like, wait, what? I was like, how fucking old is she? Like, how is she like that then? We can make the argument you still being around is like, you're a ghoul, but what about Moldaver? It's like, how is she still? Like, she don't look like a ghoul. How the hell is she still alive after all this time? Maybe she was like, well, not unless it was like, it could be, well, I was like, it could be easily explained as like a cryo thing. She could easily have been in cryo, which we do see, like, what at the end of the episodes, those look like those were cryo chambers, maybe. So I don't know if maybe that. I mean, that'd be the easiest explanation of why, yeah, she was in cryo sleep the entire time. But it also makes sense for her to be like, right, coming after and kidnapping Lucy and Norm's dad, considering this is all Vault Tech related. And as we can see in the past, she was super against Vault Tech because she thought it was all BS and didn't trust them and saw them as evil. So it is interesting. And he met her like at the meeting because she's the one running things. So it's like this whole thing has been in the making for a long time. They were maybe a small scale organization before and maybe grown in all that time or what? Like, how does her... I mean, she is seen as like this Messiah-esque figure in a lot of ways, or at least she's worshipped, like, not necessarily like a god, but like, you know, in the sense of you are kind of like a savior, like you're the one fighting against all the BS that is Vault Tech stuff. So that is interesting. But yeah, focusing on present day, Cooper got grabbed up by the government, which I love. If you look at the sign, it's spelled mint as in like MINT mint instead of MENT, which is interesting. I was like, oh, I love that. But it's like, yeah, it's kind of like a sheriff's, and there's a guy Sorrell who knows Cooper, like they have history. But apparently he also knows enough about Cooper to be like, oh, you're still looking for her. So it's like, who are you talking about? Is he talking about his daughter, or is he talking about Barb? Because it's like, would they even still be alive? Like, what's going on? Like, or once again, it could be a vault thing of they were in cryo or something like that, and he's looking for them. Or it could be a thing of maybe his daughter was a ghoul and she's still out there. There's just so much we don't know. But it's like, that could be either or. Because he specifically said her. It's not them. He specifically said her, so it's only one person. So maybe his wife didn't make it, but maybe his daughter did, and she's somewhere out there. Maybe he doesn't know what vault she's in. Maybe they got separated. I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting piece of dialogue. Also thought it was interesting that Coop is sewing I don't know why I was about to call her by the wrong name, Lucy, because like the whole Goosey thing later on was making me almost about to call her a different name. It wasn't even Goosey, it was like something I was going to call her like a completely different name. Either way, he was sewing Lucy's finger onto his hand, so that's kind of a neat bond between them where it's like, yeah, the man who cut off your finger is now using your finger, and you ended up getting a different finger stitched onto you by the robot, which is voiced by Sebastian, who is a friend of Cooper. So it's like funny how that, like, there's that connectivity like that. But either way, that whole sequence too with Cooper when he like killed those like sheriffs, he shot that last dude. I was like, did he shoot him in the ass? And then when you look at it, it's like, it kind of looks like that might be balls, or that might be the taint. Like, his shit down there is obliterated either way. Like, either your genitals are gone, and he went for the ball shot, a la, what's the fucking games you can like snipe people in their balls? Is it like Sniper Elite going for the testicle shots? Once again, I know a little bit about like Fallout's combat, but it's like, especially because like I said, there's almost like that bullet time thing that you kind of have where you can like focus on, like I said, I think you can, maybe it's a later Fallout games, like I said, you can focus on different parts of the body. Either way, it's probably a tank shot. It might be a testicle shot. Who knows? I still was like, wow. Especially considering Sorrell had just said, like, yeah, like, was no one better at shooting a bounty in their ass like Cooper was. So that's just interesting in its own right. So we have that. And then finally, we also have the other big chunk of the story, which focuses on Vault 4, which is where... God, I was about to call Lucy by her real name, Ella. Where Lucy and Maximus, or Titus, are. It's also interesting finding out the bullet inside of his arm was a tooth bullet, which makes a lot of sense considering, it's like, oh, of course, cannibals would make the most of the human body. It's like, well, we can't eat it. Let's use it as ammunition. So that's wild. But yeah, they're staying here, and even from the very beginning, you're kind of like, I don't know, it's a little weird. Obviously, he wants to leave immediately, but Lucy's like kind of fine with staying here. Understandable. This is her safe zone. It's like everything up there is bullshit. So like, cool, I'm in a place. Might not be my vault, but she's assuming like, well, Vault 33 is the way it is, so every other vault's got to be exactly the same way too, I'm sure. So she's not thinking much of it. She's like, kind of like I said, she's kind of like, the atmosphere is like, yes, it's almost like being home after so long. It's like, oh my God, I'm home after dealing with the bullshit of the surface. Then her and Maximus got put in his room for test subjects. So you're like, what's that about? Because the moment they started acting weird, she was like, so you want to have like sex? And he was like, wait, what? I was like, where the fuck did that come from? I was like, I get it. It's also like sex is kind of, it's meaningful, but also very thrown away. Like, it has no like bearings. It's kind of like, oh, like, we're going to be here for a while, so I want to have sex. I'm like, just the casualness in which that was thrown out there was like wild. But once again, it's like, they're all about like repopulating and stuff like that regardless. So it's kind of ingrained in them to be all about that. But like, that's why I was almost thinking, like, are they pumping shit in there to make you horny or something? And then, like, I also love that Maximus multiple times says cock instead of penis. Like, to me, because, like, when you're trying to be, like, very, like platonic and, like, like very medical about it. You say like, oh, penis and vagina, but like just saying like cock is like saying pussy, you know. So it's like, oh, I just would like it almost it has that same feeling to me like saying cock, you know. I'm like, oh, like I don't know, like I would have expected dick, but like cock being said, I was like, oh shit, it's a little jarring because I wasn't expecting that. But yeah, he was like, oh yeah, like, cause he's like, yeah, I heard some people have that issue where like it bulges up and then it basically explodes. She's like, no, that's supposed to happen. I was like, oh, interesting, because he knows nothing about it. Which she's like, oh, you want to do that? And he's like, no, like I'm a knight. Which is like, you're not. I don't know how that rule works for squires, but you got to keep up the lie in case. Well, because he also like, I'm sure, I don't. Well, actually, is that real? Is the knight thing real? Or is that just BS because he was nervous about it? Because it's like, right, I'm a virgin. It's like, dude, no one's going to blame you if you don't know anything about it. But maybe it's like sex is a known commodity. For him to say that about, like, it seemed like it isn't. You know, so I was like, that also makes it seem like guys don't masturbate either, do you? I don't know. There's layers to that where you're like, oh, peeling back on what that necessarily means. So he's kind of like, no, I'm a knight. I shouldn't. But I'm like, once again, you're not a knight. But I guess you have to keep that lie up in case you meet other people and knowing that the knight. I don't know. I guess it goes in line with keeping with the story of being a knight when he's not one. Missed out on some sex, so that blows. But yeah, as they're chilling and everything, Maximus is noticing, yeah, people are a little too smiley. He's like, yeah, this is a cult. Which I was like, are you saying that like unironically or ironically? Unironically, because it's like, I treat the Brotherhood like a cult, but it's like it's probably more like a militia, but I feel like a militia could be cultish. So I'm like, isn't the Brotherhood like a cult? That's when I'm like, are you saying that? He's like, oh, I'm able to recognize a cult because he's like, yeah, it has all the hallmarks of a cult. And it's like, is he saying that because it's like, oh, I recognize I'm in a cult. I'm all about the Brotherhood, but I recognize it as a cult, so I can recognize other cults, or maybe he's come across other cults. Or is it just a thing of, oh, I don't recognize the Brotherhood as that. I've just seen other cults, and I'm like, yes, this place is a cult. Being the irony being like he doesn't recognize the Brotherhood as one, even though it is one. But, that's how I've kind of viewed it. But like I said, like I've been saying this episode, maybe it is more militia than cult. Like I feel like those two don't have to be mutually exclusive of militia and a cult. Definitely don't have to be. I feel like the Brotherhood fits that, but, maybe that's on my ignorance. But once again, Lucy doesn't see much of it because it's like, right, people are happy and they want to be helpful. And it's just like, that's just how this place is. And then they meet Overseer Benjamin, which the moment I saw him, I'm like, is that who I think it is? I was like, that looks and sounds like Chris Parnell. And it is, in fact, Chris Parnell. The thing I best know him for is, playing Cyril on Archer. The show Archer. So I was like, oh man. I was like I said, it look, because that's the funny thing too about some of them, not all of them, but some of the characters of Archer are kind of designed after their respective voice actors. Not everyone, but I'm like, I think Alana, I was about to say Alana. Lana looks a little bit like Aisha Taylor to some extent, and just like Mallory kind of look like Jessica Walter. So it's stuff like that where it's like, yeah, like Chris Parnell, I think kind of looks a little like Cyril. So either way, I'm going on this massive Archer tangent, which I need to circle back to. I've never seen. There's like the last 2 or 3 seasons I've never seen of Archer, and I know because I obviously last year, was it this year that the final season aired? Once again, tangents. But yeah, he has the one eye, and I love that that's all Lucy can focus on. I guess for the most part, it's because like, well, everyone's relatively normal from where she comes from, so she's looking at that like, oh, that's got to be the radiation thing. Until Benjamin's like, oh no, I'm 5th generation. She's almost like, wait, how the fuck did that happen? How are you 5th generation with one eye? She's like, that doesn't make sense. Whereas like Titus is kind of like, it doesn't mean anything. Like she's noticing the abnormalities, being like, oh, this is weird. How like she's like, right, some of these people being from the surface, which we had found out, some of the people in Vault 4 are from Shady Sands. They're refugees that made their way here. So that's what she's kind of looking at. But then finding out about Benjamin, she's like, that doesn't make any sense because no one that's a multi-generational like person, like the multi-generations that's happened in the Vault that she was part of, like nothing like that came up. That seems like it'd be an abnormality from the radiation, but Apparently not. Who knows how much of all this is bullshit, how much isn't. It seems legit, but who knows. Um, but Benjamin had explained that they let the people of Shady Sands in because it's kind of like part of their motto to help people. I mean, it's kind of like, right, we're supposed to go to the surface and help people in that regard, rebuild society, yada yada. That's kind of like the message of, like, you know, the vault specifically. Like, that might have been more specifically maybe 31, 32, and 33's thing, might not just have been 33's thing. But for them, it's like, well, we can't really go to the surface, but we can bring in the surface dwellers, which even Lucy's like, wow, even our vault's never done that. But she's like, no, that's actually a good thing. You want to help out people. You kind of want to save people from, like, the bullshit that is the surface. But also, he's a very insensitive jerk, being like, oh yeah, like, some of them can't take a joke that I've said 1 or maybe 10 times. And she's like, what joke was it? He's like, I don't remember, but I remember it was a bomb. And it's like, I mean, understandable. Like, a lot of death and destruction happened. It's like, it's still a relative enough wound where you're like, yikes, dude. You know, but it's like, so, like, the effed up thing is like, well, that's kind of like the real world too. I mean, it's not the same equivalency. It's a national tragedy, but it's like, I mean, we're the year 2024, and there's been plenty for the past few years. I mean, there's been a lot, but I feel like in the past few years, there have been a lot of 9/11 jokes and memes. Like, a lot. Like, you'll find some wild 9/11 memes and, like, jokes on TikTok in particular. So, you know, it's like, it's not like that out of pocket. But that's what I was like, we're talking about, like, a nuclear fallout, nuclear bomb. And then, once again, I'm not trying to compare tragedies. Tragedies are tragedies. Some, like, have a more higher death toll than others, but they can still have, like, you know, large impacts, no matter how big or small the tragedy may have been on the scale of death, you know? So, I don't know, just, like, obviously his insensitivity to it, especially because it's like, well, we're vaulters, we should be a little more sensitive to stuff like that, especially when you're talking about the people you brought in. They don't want to constantly be reminded of the tragedy that led to them having to live underground, so... But his obliviousness, couldn't get that word out, obliviousness, still can't get it out. I'm gonna move on. You know, his ignorance, still, he doesn't recognize it. That's interesting stuff on that front. We have Maximus, who his armor got transferred there, so he's decided, like, cool, I'm gonna go in and just steal this fusion core. And I'm like, don't they need that? What were you gonna do with that? Were you gonna borrow it enough to, like, how is that going to work out, considering, like, well, don't they need that power? Don't they need that? Or were you hoping, like, oh, if I take it, well, they'll just put in a new one. They probably have plenty here, because, like, you can't live on this one forever. So I was like, I'll just take this one and bounce. But then Birdie is like, oh, like, I know it's hard to trust. And he's like, yeah, very cultish of, like, don't you want to stay? Don't you feel safe and comfortable here? You could take a hot shower. And he's like, what the hell is that? So gets his own room, which I love. Obviously, it's the exact hallway Cooper was walking down. Obviously, he was doing the entire vault tour, but specifically, these are the places he was, like, I don't know if that family was, it'd be very poetic if that family was specifically in 248, which is the one that he ended up getting. But he got in the shower, smelled everything, tasted everything, tasted caviar for the first time. And he's just like, walks out to a random dude and is like, what is this? Isn't caviar, like, is it fish eggs or is it oyster eggs? I think it's oyster eggs specifically. But by the time Lucy comes back to check on Maximus, he's gotten inducted. Which also, once again, fits, going back to my point of, well, the Brotherhood's kind of like a cult, and it makes you feel comfortable, makes you feel safe, especially what the Knights meant to Maximus, because of what was the first thing he saw after the bomb dropped, after he got out, once again, maybe a refrigerator or whatever. First thing he saw was a Knight of the Brotherhood. So, of course, he's someone that could easily be indoctrinated into it. So, he's all about it. And it's like, oh yeah, they're a little weird, but no, they gave me a robe and slippers. So he's all about it, enjoying his caviar. And Lucy wants to prove, like, yeah, there's something going on with the place. Because this is after she went to their little gathering where they proceeded to remove their tops. Which at first I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I was like, is this about to be a fucking orgy? But it stopped, and I was like, okay. Because I was like, oh, I'm seeing a lot of boobs and nip. I legitimately thought, like, yo, are we going, well, it's not going to be as wild, but I was like, are we about to fucking have a hero-gasm here in Fallout? It's like, nah, but they just like stripped off their top, and they're like, they rubbing the ashes of those who died at Shady Sands, which I keep doing that. Like, I keep almost want to call Ella by her real name instead of just like calling her Lucy or by the character's name. Lucy saw the history of, like, wasn't it like what was it, almost like 100 years of history or whatever, about like the NCR, new California Republic forming, and then like the bomb, like a lot of that kind of going down. Wasn't it like 100 and some years? Because it was like 2100 something, and then like the bombs fell like 2077, I think. So, actually, I don't think they specifically tell you what year it is, like right now, because I think the opening of the opening of the series happens, and then it says like 200 years later. I think it did. I don't remember, but obviously when the bombs fell previously, like Maximus was a kid. I'd assume Maximus is in his mid to late 20s. I don't know. So it's been like maybe like a decade and a half or something like that since the bombs last fell. Who knows? But yeah, like, and the people are worshiping, like I said, Moldaver. It's like, okay, all the surface dwellers who came to the vault are worshiping Moldaver, which I'm like, the vault people are aware of it, but they kind of let them do their own thing. They're like, oh, those surface dwelling weirdos, they smell and they're into weird stuff. I'm like, none of that seemed suspicious to you. Just kind of let that go. It's like, okay, once again, kind of the naivete of the... I mean, the only reason why, like, Lucy and her people weren't like that in Vault 33 is because, like, well, you were literally getting murdered by the raiders, so it's a little different from, like, people just doing weird stuff. So either way, that's what made her go to Maximus, but he's not ready to leave, so she wants to find proof, goes down to level 12, sees a video of a lady, like, giving birth to what seemed like to be gulpers, because there was, like, a frozen gulper body that, like, we see kind of smash up against some glass. So, like, I don't know if, like, for experimental purposes, they stuffed a whole bunch in her, made her give birth to him. Whatever it was, they proceeded to start eating her body like she was flesh in the water, like a piranha. Like I said, just I would assume because we saw a gulper, like, those are gulpers, but I don't know. Maybe it could have just been piranhas, but it's like, I guess that was a test. I don't know what to make of that. Then there's like those. There was that one body that we never got to see what was on the inside of the tube, but I'm like, I don't know if that's the same lady from the video, because we saw like boobs and a belly, and so I'm like, we saw a whole bunch of other capsules, and it's like, who knows what that all represents. Lucy tries to escape, but Birdie and the others capture her, and that's where things end. I'm sure they're going to tell Maximus some bullshit of, well, Lucy decided to leave. Because they made a point of Lucy being like, I promise I'm not going to leave you. It's supposed to be like, I think when the next episode happens, Maximus going like, no, Lucy promised she wouldn't leave, and she's not the type to break her promise. She is disgustingly honest, you know? So it's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Only 2 episodes left in the season. Very, very excited to ultimately see where all this goes. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.